Welcome to Rates and Barrels. It's Friday, May 5th. Derek Van Riper, Al Melchior, Eno Saris, all here. Full house on a Friday. It's rare. We knew when we set out to do more pods this season that we weren't going to have every single episode with everybody available, but this is one of those days, one of those special days. I knew it was going to be a good day because I DoorDashed donuts again this morning.
Let's get the Welsh.
Dad life.
Dad life, yes. You're like, he can't even go out and get his own donuts. Like, no. but I need them
Takes
so
a lot
bad.
to get out of the house right now.
It takes extraordinary efforts. And if I get a haircut in the next 6 weeks, it'll be a miracle. But I'm hoping I don't have to resort to using the clippers on myself. That is not what you want. But a lot of ground to cover on this Friday, and we're going to start with our big news of the week. Tons of prospects coming up. A lot of pitchers earlier in the week. We're going to start today with Matt Mervis getting called up by the Cubs. And this is a player we were hoping we'd see on the opening day roster. Unfortunately, we had to wait until May 5th for that to actually happen. That probably made it very difficult to stash Mervis in a lot of redraft leagues. There's a good chance he was dropped, even in leagues where he was previously drafted as a reserve player. I think the simple question is, what are we expecting Mervis to be? Is he enough of an impact guy at first base to immediately start cracking lineups in 10-team leagues, 12-team leagues? Al, where are you dropping the cutoff for Mervis as you think about picking up this weekend?
I think he's borderline 12-team relevant. And I thought about this, and the way that I broke it down was I looked at the projections, which I all thought were maybe slightly conservative, having him around 245, 250 batting average. If you figure he is going to play close to every day here on out, maybe he can get to 20 homers. And I figure that puts him kind of in Josh Bell territory. And so to me, that's somebody who's kind of on the fringes of 12-teamers.
Yeah, he's hit at every single stop since the start of last season. It's really impressive. Bringing the K rate down, bringing the walk rate up, showing plenty of power. Doesn't offer any speed, but most first basemen don't. Do you think the projections are a little light on Mervis too? Because that was what I saw when I ran the auction calculator for the rest of the season. The numbers for Mervis versus Nick Pratto were actually surprisingly close in the calculator. And for me, Pratto is like a very borderline maybe AL only sort of player, whereas Mervis actually is going to help us in a lot of formats.
He doesn't have amazing hard hit rates in the minor leagues, does Matt Mervis. And that's, I think, the only kind of concerning bit is how does he get to that power? Because otherwise you would say, well, here's a guy who's basically had a 300 ISO since 2022 began at 3 different levels, and we're projecting him for less than a 200 ISO. Like, is that right? He hits a fair amount of fly balls, but what if he's hitting them softly? I don't know. Do you hit since the beginning of 2022? Do you hit 40 plus homers softly?
Seems hard, doesn't it?
Seems hard. So if the projections are light on power, then you were talking, easily hitting that 20 homer mark. And, I think it was interesting to bring up Josh Bell because I'm falling out of love with him in a couple places in 12-teamers. And I think I might make that switch if it was available to me. The projections are really similar, 250, 260 for both, 15 to 18 homers for Bell. But the error bar skews towards positive for Mervis, I think, and less so for Bell, who has once again a bad ground ball rate, and actually this time the worst ground ball rate of his career.
Yeah, Josh Bell, for a player that you'd think would be consistent, isn't. Like the variation in his performance, he's so much more erratic than you'd expect him to be. There's so much more amplitude.
He doesn't strike out a lot. You like strikeout guys. You think Patrick Wisdom would be the guy that would be like all over the place,
Right, yeah. Like someone who controls the zone like Josh Bell, you would just think if you look at the rolling WOBA chart, you'd see a pretty narrow range. The peak wouldn't be crazy high. The lows wouldn't be terribly low. But we've seen this before from Bell. What's funny is I think people are going to go out and throw pretty big bids at Mervis. He's probably at least a 10% fab range player at the minimum in most leagues, probably going to get bigger bids at some of the high stakes leagues that are out there. And Bell's going to get cut. And next weekend in those leagues, those very same leagues, Bell's going to go for like half as much right? That's probably what's going to happen. That's sort of how Fab works. Like Fab is like this voluntary exercise where someone in the league overpays for everyone. That's what happens in Fab.
What it reminds me of, what's the thing that Andrew Friedman said? If you never overpay, you never get a free agent.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, that's just the economic structure of baseball is the same way, but fantasy baseball is like that too. We all have these bloated $1,000 budgets. We want to spend them on someone. We know it's not helpful to have money left over at the end. It's not like you get it back in prize money. Hey, you saved $200 FAP dollars. Here's some money back. It's like, no, you got to spend it.
You don't want to leave money on the table.
So it's like these hyperinflated bids because we're all just hoping to catch lightning in a bottle. And then we're playing these small sample size games, which still, even on May 5th, like we're still dealing with 30 games worth of information about 6 starts for pitchers. A lot can go right and a lot can go wrong in a sample that size that isn't necessarily meaningful. Ever since we brought up Masataka Yoshida on the show 10 days ago, he's done nothing but hit. He has been on the biggest heater ever. He's been unbelievable.
Now he looks like a complete stud.
Cause and effect.
I mean, that's the power of a couple of weeks. So I just say that because I think if you expect Fab to be this perfect exercise of efficiency, you will be chasing the ghost forever. You will always be disappointed. You will never ever be efficient at Fab. It's so it's impossible to be an efficient Fab player in the sense of always getting the bids right and not overpaying for the players you have to get, because everyone sees and hears the same things that you see and hear going into the weekend. We're all talking about the same players on these pods. We're all writing about the same players in these articles. And the pool is only so big of relevant players. Everyone's sorting by the same categories when they're looking at those boards on every site. So that's my keeper league. Al plays in my keeper league now. Maki. The bids this year have been stupid. Like most of the bids in that league, that's a league that only uses a $100 Fab budget because the price that you pick someone up at is the price they would be as a keeper. But there have been so many double-digit bids on players that I thought were $3, $5 players. It's just there's something that gets into people, especially early in the season, to spend up.
We had a question about how you run your Fab. So I want to throw that question to you guys. I mean, I could look for the details of the question. It's basically like, how do you guys come up with your Fab numbers? And the real answer is you the more you play, the more you start to be like, okay, this is a guy that's like $20, like 20%. And like you hear us talking about 20% and 5%. I mean, I think that my general rubric is just like, if it's a streamer, I want to spend a single percentage point, like single digit percentage points, 1 to 3%. If it's only going to be with me for like a week or two, then that's what I want to spend. If it's someone that I could pick up for a few weeks or like has the upside to become a starter, then I can get to double digits. And then if I want to get to 3 digits out of, if this is 1,000, right? Like if I want to get to 3 digits out of 1,000, I've done that for Taj Bradley. I would do that maybe for Mervis if he's like replacing, like if I don't have a first baseman and I'm like struggling at first base and I'm struggling at power and batting average and, here, Bryce Miller, like if I really needed a pitcher, Bryce Miller is number 2 in Stuff Plus. On the board. And even if he comes down off of that and regresses off of that, he has great stuff. He has the best fastball ride among all starters in baseball right now. So like he's a dude and he looks like he has excellent runway. If you want to go to 3 digits out of 4 for him, then I would say, if you still have the money, do it.
We were ranking pitchers earlier in the week, the rookie pitchers, and Al, just thinking about other rookies we've seen come up. Do you use previous similar players from this season as your grounds for what to, kind of bid within range, of course? If you're looking at bids for Mason Miller and Taj Bradley, Tanner Bybee, what did everyone spend on those players in your leagues? That's probably as much of a guide of what you need to bid on Bryce Miller as anything else. Anything we say we're trying to guide people, but what the room is doing, the other 11 or other 14 people you're playing against, they're shaping the market more than anybody else is.
Yeah, no, absolutely. That's a big part of my process. I'm sure with you guys too, is that, yeah, the first couple of weeks you're sort of flying blind, but then once you have those first prospects come up, and then you see what the rooms are paying in those early bids, and yeah, that kind of calibrates things for me going forward. But it's not 100% based on that, because when I make recommendations in my waiver column, it's partly based on what I think it's going to take to win the player, but it's also based on what I would actually do and how I value that player. And so, for an example with Bryce Miller, I'm a little concerned because he hasn't pitched to AAA, and I know that AA is actually probably the more difficult space, but still there's a lot of cases of players coming up directly from AA and having to go back or go to AAA, and Miller had some struggles. So, and again, in a very small sample, but we're working with a small number of minor league innings at AA, no less, to go on. So yeah, he had that great first start against Oakland, but then how do you weight that? And so I went very cautious on Miller. I recommended 5 to 6% in 15 teamers for Miller. So that's not the triple digit. I'll let somebody else spend the 10% on Miller and take that risk, and it might pay off for them, but it might not.
And I think what bridges the gap between where each of you are on Bryce Miller is your need. If you are set with pitching, you won good pitching earlier, you had enough pitching all along, then that lower range bid is fine. You still want to bid on players that you think are good, even if you don't need them. And you still want to throw something out there, because there are some times where the room misses. That happens in leagues too. I see it happen every single week. I see the screenshots. There are very competitive leagues where odd things happen in Fab. But I do think a triple-digit bid is probably what it's going to take to get Bryce Miller in most leagues. I think the start was so good, and then the fact that it's backed up by the stuff numbers, that's only going to solidify those numbers even further. I think that's one of the things that really drives confidence right now, is having this new tool that takes a very small sample and gives us a much better idea of what it's likely to mean. It's not just Bryce Miller available this weekend, though. I think this is a really fun exercise for Fab, too. Brandon Pfaadt has major issues with the home run ball in that debut. I'm curious what he looked like in the model compared to what we were seeing at AAA. We've talked a lot about him on Tuesday episodes, the Project Prospect stuff we've been doing. How did Pfaadt actually grade out as far as the quality of his pitches, even though the results were just horrendous in Texas for him earlier this week?
Yeah, it actually looked great. I mean, a 99 fastball stuff plus was basically above what he was doing at Reno, which might have been affected by altitude. And there is a weird thing where batters weren't swinging at his fastball. And I think that probably has to do maybe with where he was locating it. And they were sitting on his breaking balls and hitting them, but his breaking balls have good stuff plus. So I would not just be out on Pfaadt after that one start. In fact, I think the underlying numbers were something that I'm excited about. And the thing about homers is that it's I think one of the hardest things to see is that homers are noise. Homers are the biggest way to skew someone's stat line in a negative or positive way, depending on if you're talking about batters or pitchers, that have a certain amount of luck involved in them, and aren't sticky or don't tell you a lot really quickly. So the fact that he gave a bunch of homers does not actually mean that much. And if you look at Bryce Miller's minor league line, it was because he gave up a lot of homers that, they didn't look so good. And I talked to him about it, and he was like, yeah, the games in which I gave up the homers, like we literally had 40-mile-an-hour winds to center field. And like just knowing what the minor leagues are like, and like he was like, and every squib hit I gave up, like found grass or like a defender couldn't get to it. So it's like I've seen plenty of little league games like that, little league, yeah, and minor league games like that,
and little league.
And so I think for Pfaadt, the homers not great, but doesn't mean I'm getting off the bandwagon.
Yeah, and I think we also have Gavin Stone thrown into the mix here, too. So
I was never on the bandwagon.
You've never been on the bandwagon for Stone. It looks like Stone's going to go at Milwaukee for his next turn.
Yikes.
So, Alan, leagues where all three are available. I got to speak about this a little bit earlier in the week. Is Pfaadt still the guy that you'd actually have at the top based on all of our previous expectations for him? Because that actually still makes sense to me. You shouldn't take one great start and one bad start and just completely throw everything from the last couple of years out the window. Like if you thought Brandon Pfaadt was better, was the better pitcher of the two, thought he was better than Bryce Miller going into this week, you probably shouldn't have changed that unless you didn't know anything or know enough about Bryce Miller, right? It's possible that there was a gap in knowledge. I don't think people were talking as much about Bryce Miller throughout the winter as they were about Brandon Pfaadt.
Yeah, I mean, Bryce Miller was not somebody who was getting drafted in order to stash. Brandon Pfaadt was. So, no, the one start doesn't change anything for me at all. I didn't downgrade Pfaadt, and I mean, the nice thing is maybe you can knock 1 or 2% off the bid just because maybe your league mates will be more down on him, but they shouldn't be. It's just one start, and plus, I made a comparison between Pfaadt and Stone in the column. And one factor there is that Pfaadt's going to be, I think, in that rotation to stay. Where's the competition? I mean, we've seen some puzzling moves and players getting sent down that we wouldn't think they would, or those who stay up that we wouldn't think. But that there's not the level of competition there that there is in the Dodgers rotation. So
yeah, Bobby Miller's coming.
That's right.
Like, they have a bunch of different guys. If you struggle in the Dodgers rotation, I think you're back in the minors.
Exactly. And maybe even if you don't struggle, maybe if you're just decent, but
right.
It's just a numbers game. So I'm pretty much out on Stone in 12 teamers. He's not somebody that I would feel good enough about to be holding down a bench spot and stashing for what could be a long time once he's down again.
I assume that unless something changes injury wise in the next 72 hours, we find out that one of the Dodgers starters goes on the IL. They've been messing with the schedule a lot. Maybe that's an indication that Gavin Stone have a longer window to stay in this rotation. I think I'm a little more interested in Stone than both of you, but he's a clear third for me among these three where all are available. There were a few more hitters that have been called up recently. Michael Garcia, called up by the Royals, has hits in each of his first 3 games. Wasn't playing particularly well at AAA. This is a Kansas City team with plenty of opportunity. What's your interest level, Al? I mean, there's been some interesting numbers from him in the past as far as having this kind of power speed combo. And I don't know, I kind of think the Royals need anything they can find that helps their offense since they've been one of the worst lineups in the league this season.
Yeah, I'm not too worried about the playing time, but the team context it's sort of a double-edged sword because, yeah, maybe he'll not have to struggle for the playing time, but he also could really struggle to produce runs. So the power speed combination is something that makes him certainly somebody I would want to bid on this weekend in 15 teamers, but that would be the extent of it.
This is Garcia.
Yeah, Garcia and Xavier Edwards, JJ Bleday, all these guys are all up, and none of them are going to be nearly as expensive as Mervis. None of them are going to be hyped like a lot of their top prospects that
they're
we tend to
interesting
see.
Secondary bids. The thing for Garcia is I was ready to write him off as not having power, and that's still potentially the case. But I did watch him drive the ball all the way to the wall. That's kind of a funny thing, like we're just talking about how homers are noise, and like I saw him like really drive a ball, and I'm like, is that the best you've got? If that's the best you've got, then you don't have power, right? You know what I mean? But if that's like in your bag and you have better than that, then you're kind of intriguing. So I'm a little bit out on Michael Garcia. The power, he has one level, 186 plate appearances at one level where he had above average ISO. So I think he's in a long line of Nicky Lopez's and so on and so forth. So I'm more in on Bleday, who told me that he's made a bit of a swing change, a change in philosophy. He is swinging a lot less, chasing a lot less, and he has put into his head the idea that he is going to swing down on the ball. Now, that doesn't mean he's actually going to swing down on the ball, but he had a long, loopier swing, and by thinking swing down on the ball, he can shorten it. And so that's what you see when you see a great improvement in his swing strike rate in AAA for Oakland this year. It's only been 8 plate appearances, but that swing strike rate has ported over so far. And it would be really intriguing to see JJ Bleday put up the same kind of power that he's shown in the past with like an 18% strikeout rate. I think that would change what I thought of him as a player. So Bleday is kind of interesting to me. I think he's going to get some runway too.
And he spent a lot of time at AAA last year as a member of the Marlins organization, struck out 27% of the time over 85 games, got that down to 12.6% through the first 25 games this season. That's a massive improvement. Even if that's not the true talent level, that's a lot of improvement. Even if he's a 15 to 18% guy at AAA, a low 20s% strikeout rate from JJ Bleday in the big leagues, that would be better than we expected based on what he did when he debuted with the Marlins a year ago. Because that K rate was at 28%. I didn't think he was a center fielder. We talked about that at the time when he got called up, but I do think in Oakland, very, very open runway for him to play and to play a lot. So see if they can make good on the trade that sent AJ Puck to Miami. Xavier Edwards got called up by the Marlins. Speaking of the Marlins, and he's kind of bounced around through the minor leagues and shown speed and the ability to get on base and not a lot of power. I think this is a guy that has even less power than Michael Garcia. So if you're looking for that classic speedster sort of play, the question will come down to whether or not Edwards is going to get on base enough to take off and really use his wheels. So, Al, how do you see him fitting in with the Marlins in terms of his playing time?
I mean, the Marlins, it doesn't seem to matter what the regime is. The Marlins love speedy players. And this is a roster that's already got John Birdie and Garrett Hampson. But given that, I'm just not sure if Edwards is going to be back down pretty quickly. So he has yet to start a game with the Marlins. So right now, I'm not really that interested. Even 15 teamers, I think I could probably find steals elsewhere. I think more of a watch list player for deep leagues and, of course, mono leagues. I think there's a good reason to pursue him, but I think right now, otherwise, he's just somebody put on the watch list for see how the playing time develops.
Yeah, the speedster to think about instead might be Nate Eaton because Kyle Isbell is going on the IL for the Royals.
I saw him hurt himself. Yeah. Grab the hamstring.
It's a bummer, but Nate Eaton can take off and offer up some cheap speed as well if that's a category that you need.
And we've been getting a little bit. He has just a whiff of upside about him where the strikeout rates have not been bad in the minors. The ISOs have been good. This is a guy that maybe if he was given, some real chance, he could do better than his projections, I think.
Yeah, I think Eaton's a little complicated because he's been old for the level everywhere he's played, which was also, like many players, made worse by the lost 2020 season. But you could do a lot worse, especially in deep leagues. I think even in 15-team leagues, you might want to take a flyer on him as kind of the bottom of your bid list sort of player because he may play more than you think, and he might be a little better than people realize. The other player I wanted to ask about on the hitting side is Christian Encarnacion-Strand. We've had multiple mailbag questions about him this week. Is it time to start stashing him in redraft leagues where available? And how does he fit into the Reds playing time picture? Any thoughts on CES,
I know there's this real buzz. Is there actually some news?
I haven't seen anything yet as far as a call-up, but
he's been kind of like building buzz where people were just like, he's killing it down there. And
he had
7 homers in 10 games.
I think it was.
Three that must have been it. No, that starts circulating on Twitter, and everyone's like, "When's he coming up? Is he the next guy?" I don't know. I mean, Votto's got to come back soon too, And Encarnacion-Strand has played 6 games at first this year, and 2 games at DH, and 2 games at third. Steer seems to be fine at third. I don't know. I think this might take longer than people think because. Votto at some point is going to, Votto is not like even rehabbing. Like he's just like, I don't feel right yet. So at some point he might just be like, I'm ready to go, And once he does that, then I think the Reds get more complicated in terms of what the depth chart looks like. And, so right now, who's playing first for them? A lot of, Will Myers went on the depth chart on the DL, IL. So who's playing first for them?
They have been a revolving door at a couple of spots. I think first for them, Steer's been playing some first or can play some first. That's the way you could make it fit. Nick Senzel's been playing a lot.
So Senzel's been playing
Senzel's been playing third.
And
he's playing third and Steer's been playing first. Nick Senzel, man.
Also play the outfield.
I like him more on the infield. I think that actually makes a lot of sense. So far this year, Nick Senzel has played 11 games at third, 13 in the outfield, and 4 at second. It's a lot of versatility. He's always had that athleticism. But yeah, I wonder if this is just a little bit too crowded at those spots for now. But then again, like, is TJ Friedel really blocking someone? Is Henry Ramos, is he blocking someone? Are they good enough to block someone? I know people like Friedel, some people like Ramos. they don't seem like long-term pieces. If they think Encarnacion-Strand is ready, they'll bring him up.
With like basically like kind of a league average-ish player. I don't think Fairchild is really pushing for more time. He looks like a fourth outfielder type.
So you've got a little bit of sogginess on the depth chart where DH, first base, and even one of the outfield spots could all be pretty flexible.
Fraley's at 27. Yeah, like Fraley, Friedel, and Fairchild. It's funny that they all start with F, but they're all like older than you think and don't have as much upside and like would be fine outfielders if you didn't need them to be like better than they are. You know what I mean? Like
they'd be ideal fourth outfielders.
Yeah,
with a universal DH, they'd be perfect fourth outfielders because you could start them 3 or 4 times a week, never play them against lefties, and life would be good. But if you put them out there 6 or 7 days a week,
yeah, and I think the path for CES has to be, unless Steer really drops off, I think it's got to be DH, and get replacing somebody like Ramos or people who are playing in the DH slot.
Fruit. Maybe just shift Votto to DH.
Yeah, or that.
And then you've got Steer, Senzel, and Encarnacion-Strand sort of sharing first, third, and DH with Votto. I don't know.
So I want to throw this out there as more of a general question. We got a group of players we've seen see upticks in playing time this week. It includes Nick Prado, who I mentioned earlier, who I don't think is very good. Emmanuel Valdez, who I think is kind of interesting. Emmanuel Rivera.
He had some of the best hard hit rates in the minors.
Yeah, he popped for us as a prospect of the week, I think, at some point last year, too.
Swing decisions and in-zone contact.
And I don't think he's much of a defender either, but he has started 7 of the last 8, and second base has been sort of a revolving door in Boston. Tyrone Taylor's back. Dominic Fletcher, we talked about him a little earlier in the week. Gavin Sheets. Al, I'll go to you first. Does anyone out of that group really stand out as someone you want to go after and bid somewhat aggressively on this weekend?
I mean, honestly, not. And I even in a deep league, I've missed out on Fletcher just because I'm not sure long term if there's playing time for him, anything more than as part of platoon. So I get, like you said, Valdez is kind of interesting. I don't know if he sticks at second base, but a little bit of power there. It's kind of funny because the two Emmanuels have sort of similar profiles, so try not to get them confused. But they're I would say in the case of Fletcher, Valdez in particular, they're like contingent 15-teamer bid types for me.
The only
like some
short term
single digity, like if I was rating some of these, I might put Blade ahead of Valdez, and
I definitely would.
Blade has changed his ability and has more runway maybe than the rest. So
this entire group felt like it was worth throwing out there as possible names to look at, but not necessarily the clear, obvious, like, make him a priority. With Valdez, the other thing that's strange, Boston's among the teams that has 2 off days on the schedule this week. And since he's a lefty, he may actually sit a couple of times because of their 5 games, 2 of them are against left-handed pitchers. They'll see Max Fried and Steven Matz.
And not a stream for sure.
Right. So don't pick him up expecting a lot of production this upcoming week. There's a very good chance he starts 3 games, and that's not what you're looking for in a weekly format. Let's move on to some other notable pitchers. As we've seen with the injuries in the Twins rotation, Bailey Ober and Louis Varland likely sticking around for a while. This is the other part of the how do you do your fab? I think there's a trap people fall into where they think, I've got to solve this for the rest of the season. No, you got to solve a week at a time. And if you're thinking about a player's longer term viability, a month might be the most realistic window for a lot of players you're bidding on fab to say, what does the month look like for them? Because after a month, everything's going to change. Chaos rains down upon the player pool, and we're going to have a whole bunch of other decisions to make. But we've talked a lot about Ober and Varland, and the Twins as a group, have done so well in the pitching model. I'm just curious, what is the longer term outlook for them now that we know we're going to see more than just a couple of spot starts for each of them?
Yeah, it's interesting. Bailey Ober, I think, may have a bit of deception to him that my model doesn't capture. He is extremely over the top. The Twins have invested heavily in the type of technology that can tell them about types of deception that I don't have access to in Stuff Plus. His numbers have been really good almost everywhere. Like he had like a 1 ERA in A-ball. Like, I mean, he's been good. And so I wouldn't tell you not to be in on him. But if he costs more than Varland, I might just do the sneaky Varland play. Because my model says that Louis Varland has 4 pitches that are average or better by Stuff Plus and has maybe as much command as Ober. And if you're looking at minor league numbers, they've been good for Varland, and that doesn't even include a 2 or 1 mile an hour increase in velocity this year.
Yeah.
His swing strike rates have always been better than Ober's. His strikeout rates have always been better than Ober's. So, if you're giving me $1, I'm definitely going to take Varland.
Interesting. Okay. Varland's actually among the pitchers that might be available with two-start week coming up, because a lot of the 2-start pitchers this week are clearly rostered players.
Given that, I'd almost be like, okay, I'll put $1 or $2 more on Varland, because the short-term situation is even better for him.
This is a pretty good stretch of schedule for the Twins to sort of prove it, too. The upcoming week, they've got 3 at home against the Padres, a little easier series over the weekend with 3 against the Cubs. Then they go on the road for 3 against the Dodgers to start the following week, an off day, and they get 3 against the Angels on the road. So a good test for the pitchers, just a good test for them overall as the current leaders of the AL Central. Al, same kind of thing for you, just a Ober versus Varland preference? Is it getting the discount?
Yeah, no, it came up in your league, DVR, because they were both available, and I put the same bid amount on both of them. Didn't get either, because, like you said, the bids are really getting inflated. But you have to prioritize who you'd rather have. So I put Ober was literally above Varland by a hair, and for me, the reasoning was just simply we've seen him succeed at the major league level, whereas we haven't seen much from Varland yet. So I like them both. Varland with that 2-step. Is, if you're talking about more of a pitch and ditch situation in a more shallow league, I would probably give Varland the preference, but in a deeper league like yours, I'll go with the more proven option in Ober.
I'm going to ask you about Brian Bayo. Al, is Brian Bayo ever going to be good? He's coming off of an outing last night against the Jays that certainly wasn't bad given the difficulty of the matchup, right? 2 earned over 5 innings, 5 Ks, 1 walk. Yeah, we'll take that. And a W against the Jays, that's excellent. On a night where Kevin Gossman actually struggled. It seems like Bayo's sort of important to the Red Sox if they're going to hang around and be a playoff team. Bayo pitching well and showing us something similar, not in ratios, but at least in terms of just good, like K sort of stuff like he did last year at AAA. Like, that's part of their story for this year. Are you buying into it? Do you see enough there to go ahead and throw some bids on Brian Bayo?
I am, and he's had 2 good starts in a row. The Toronto start was definitely the bigger test, but the prior start against the Guardians, 5 innings, 1 run allowed, 6 strikeouts, which is nice to see against Cleveland because they're not a particularly good offense, but they don't strike out a lot. So it's only 2 starts, but given that we were really excited about Bayo this time last year, there's really, I guess other than some of the major league struggles he's had, there's not really, to me, a compelling reason to not still be enthusiastic about him. So yeah, seeing him put together a couple of nice starts, I'm in.
How about you,
it's possible the model doesn't capture how good his changeup is. It's been rated by scouts as his strength for him. It looks nice. It has decent results. So you've got a good slider, a good changeup, a decent fastball. I think he's got what he needs. I don't know that I would throw him at the Braves next week. And so if I don't throw him at the Braves next week, he's a stash in weekly leagues. And then the start after that might be the Mariners at home.
Yeah, that's what it looks like.
That looks okay.
Yeah.
And then if the schedule holds at the Angels again, that's a little bit close. It's not a great park. It's an okay offense. So he's a little schedule dependent for me.
Yeah, it's hard because there were 129 Ks in the minors for him between AA and AAA, and that was in something like 96 combined innings between those 2 levels, which is just absurd. Didn't have a home run problem. It kept the walks in check to a reasonable degree as well. So if that change, in fact, was the best pitch from a scouting perspective, as we've learned, that's one of those things that the model doesn't always capture, and that might leave a little bit of a buying opportunity for some players.
Though.
that's something he really can't afford. But I do think he is important. I think he's got a good bit of job security for the Red Sox, and he seems like the guy that's kind of filling in for Garrett Whitlock. But if he pitches well enough, he probably stays, and someone else might get bumped once they get Whitlock back into the fold. One other pitching-related question: the Astros have been scrambling for replacements. Jose Urquidy and now Luis Garcia both hurt. We're supposed to get an update on Garcia this weekend. It is an arm injury for him, so hopefully it's nothing too bad. Hopefully it's just like a 1-month thing as opposed to something much worse. But we did receive confirmation that JP France is going to start on Saturday, which is nice in weekly leagues because we'll actually get to see it at the big league level without having to just buy in based on minor league numbers. I did take a peek, though, at the AAA stuff numbers. JP France actually looks somewhat interesting.
Yeah, I think 16th among starters, and that includes some guys with only one start. Mason Miller on his way through, Bobby Miller types. So if you raise the minimum innings, he could sneak into the back end of the top 10 maybe. He obviously does have some stuff because I think he led maybe the minor leagues or at least AAA last year in strikeouts, and that's a raw number. So not necessarily rate, but and it also affected by the fact that he had 110 innings at AAA, probably more than most. I mean, maybe the most. If you think about it, like how AAA works. I wouldn't be surprised there weren't a lot of other people that had more than 110 innings at that level last year. But the Fangraphs grade on his command is 50. And the location plus data on his AAA starts this year has not been super kind. It's kind of a 95 location plus, which is a little bit borderline starter reliever. So I think he's a little close to kind of the Josh James conundrum where it's like, okay, we believe in the stuff, but is the command going to be enough to be a starter? And so that makes me very tepid by and sort of more of a stash situation. And also because we won't really know how good his major league walk rate, how good his locations are after 1 or 2 or 3 starts,
It's true. The thing I'm looking at right now, by the way, I'm looking at last year's leaderboard of innings at AAA. Yeah. And France, he was 37th in AAA innings.
Okay, so I was wrong. There's a lot of people. But
it's a leaderboard. Ordinarily, you'd be like, yeah, durability. That's a good thing. You want to have lots of innings.
But you don't want to have durability at AAA. It means you're not good, right?
You're right. You're not getting the opportunity. I mean, Darren McKagan? I know it's a.
Oh, yeah.
He was
Mariners,
number 1.
Sort of depth starter, yep.
Yeah, Peyton Battenfield, Austin Cox, Cesar Valdez at 37 had 146 in the 3rd innings. Matthew Kent, Colin Wiles, Matt Crook, Ryan Nelson is the first prospect on the list.
Yeah,
realistically, and he's 8th. Kyle Muller was up there too. Muller threw a ton of innings at AAA.
Not a great list to be on.
Yeah, Josh Lindblom, who is retired and is moved on.
A guy who retired. The 37-year-old might be retired.
Yeah, and Lindblom, he seems like an awesome guy. I think he got an MBA, and he's on to his next career already after 133 innings last year at Nashville. So it's not necessarily a good place to be. Hopefully, if you have a big workload at AAA, it was because you also were at AA that year, or because you got called up. Right, that's what it usually is.
Yeah,
I was trying to decide if there's anybody else in this organization that's worth thinking about. I mean, this is 2 spots they have to fill.
Stretch out Ronel Blanco.
Yeah.
Because they're a little bit worried about their pitching depth. And Ronel Blanco, good fastball, good curveball. Not sure he has the full arsenal, and the command hasn't quite been there.
Well, the tricky thing, too, is Forrest Whitley had a couple of nice starts to begin the year at AAA and has had about 3 rough ones since then. So it doesn't really look like he's going to get that opportunity, which is a bummer.
That means I've got numbers on him, huh?
You should have some numbers on him. I don't think they looked awful, but they didn't look great.
100.4 stuff plus 91 location plus. Yow.
Yeah, that's got some reliever feel to it, doesn't it? Where he's going to shorten up the arsenal and throw harder and just be part of their bullpen. If that happened, though, I wonder if they could pull the Brian Abreu stretches out. I've wanted that for years. Just give me a chance.
Poor command.
Just give me one chance to have my heart broken by Brian Abreu as a starter.
Beautiful stuff.
And they've done it before, right? We've seen them do it with Christian Javier. It's just
he
one of those
could pull
things.
the Javier.
That's why this proof of concept. That's what I'm saying. So I don't know if you can do it in a lot of redraft leagues. It's probably more of a keeper league, dynasty league play. And Brian Abreu is around that sweet spot where he's not really getting saves, so he might actually be available. Could be a good stash in some deeper, like mixed leagues where you've got 15 plus teams and
like a
starting pitching is hard to
play
come
for
by.
what I have found is that sometimes it's valuable to have a guy like him on your roster when you're like, oh crap, like all my pitching matchups this week, or they're like I don't have enough good starting pitching matchups, and I think I'd rather just plug in a reliever and get get 3 to 4 innings of good with good Ks and maybe sneak a save or win in and so having Abreu around in a run environment where 4.3 ERAs average, I think can be good even if he doesn't become a starter.
Yeah, I was just thinking, if France is decent, then they could just go with the Johnny Bullpen route,
like France
for the fifth starter,
Brian Abreu for 2 or whatever.
Well, but I think Abreu's pretty important to them in the later part of the game. I mean, it's more exciting to think of the idea of Abreu being converted to a starter or pitching longer stints. But I thought maybe Bielak would be more likely to be filling that role.
Yeah, I kind of like Brandon Bielak a little bit. He's got a deep arsenal. Nothing's great in it. It's just he's got a lot of options, and that's kind of what you need if you're just going to hang around in the back of a rotation. Maybe he's more of a 4 and change starter on a regular basis for them, but that's probably your best bet for your second guy that's going to take over a spot if, in fact, Luis Garcia is going to miss a lot of time.
Yeah.
It's really a bummer it's not Forrest Whitley, though. He was supposed to be so good. Maybe it'll still happen in some role. I hope for his sake he can figure it all out.
Well, just, in a related topic, too, it's kind of strange with the pitching injuries to the Astros and the fact that the offense is ranking very low in terms of WOBA and ISO, that the Astros are sort of a team to think about streaming against right now. Hitters and pitchers.
Oh, you're killing me. We had a choice between Jason Adam and Ross Stripling in our main event. Ross Stripling had a 2-step of at Astros home against Milwaukee, and we chose Adam. Now we got 2 saves from Adam, so we're not too angry, but Stripling looked good against the Astros, and they definitely look like a team you can pitch to. I hate to say that about somebody with a team with Yordan Alvarez, and I will point out that Jose Altuve has been taking grounders, so I don't know how long that'll take, but since he's been out so long, I bet you there's going to actually be a rehab stint.
I would think he would need about a week's worth of games, probably a lower level than an upper level, and that's probably coming off of work at the complex where he's getting a ton of at-bats and running a lot and just doing all those things to make sure he's good to go.
What's the quickest he could be back is 2 weeks, maybe, I feel like.
2 weeks seems like a pretty reasonable but aggressive timetable. Last week we were talking about the teams we're constantly streaming against: Rockies, Tigers, Guardians, Royals, Reds, Nationals. Those are all the bottom teams by WRC plus. And since it came up on the 3-0 show, we were talking about some of the teams that were surprisingly bad offensively, teams that were worse than Oakland. And at the time of the recording, Houston was one of those teams. The Yankees were one of those teams. The White Sox were one of those teams. I ordinarily don't want to stream against any of those clubs, but the Yankees without Judge, the Astros without Altuve, the White Sox just got Tim Anderson back, so they're probably closer to themselves than they've been really at any point so far this season.
Mervis just got K'd by Edward Guerrero. Sorry.
Oh, stupid day games at Wrigley.
Yeah.
Gotta hit the day game at Wrigley on a Friday.
Sorry, you were talking about streaming against Yankees.
Well, the good teams that are underperforming. And if they're missing one of their best bats, it's a really tight rope.
Because then they could wake up against your start and you're like, oh, duh.
Yeah, and I think the thing that you'd also look at, of course, would be strikeout rate. The Astros still don't strike out a ton. So you're not getting that extra boost in that category to take on the risk. So I'd still be pretty careful about messing with the Astros with kind of mediocre starters, even though by numbers they're right there in the thick of things with some of the teams that we're picking on all the time.
But then they could string together a bunch of hits with contact rate. Yeah.
Yeah. So I'm cautiously optimistic that they're going to find it.
Alvarez and Alex Bregman on that team. Like they still, and Pena can go off. So like they still have 3 really dangerous hitters that can hurt you.
Yeah, and then the salt in the wound will be the guys that shouldn't hurt you also hitting a 2-run jack off your pitcher too. That's the
Maldonado goes yak. I mean, that's why we didn't pitch Stripling in the end. We're like, I don't know.
Right, you're just protecting yourself from the worst possible outcome. I had a handful of names listed as possible 2-start pitchers that might actually be available some places. I'll throw them all out there. We'll talk about whether or not we want to use any of these guys. Kyle Gibson, 2 at home against good teams, the Rays and Pirates. Graham Ashcraft, probably only available in shallow leagues right now, like 8 and 10 team leagues, home against the Mets, road against the Marlins. Deeper leagues, Michael Lorenzen may be available everywhere. At Cleveland, home against Seattle. I think I'm just done waiting on something good to happen with Michael Lorenzen.
No, I like all 3 of those so far.
You like all 3? Okay. And Clark Schmidt, home against Oakland, home against Tampa Bay, the absolute perfect stress test for the model and for our hearts. So I know you've got a lot more to say about Clark Schmidt. He's becoming the new Mitch Keller. He's the guy his name in the word cloud just keeps getting bigger every week on this show.
I just want to be like call a moratorium.
I just want to get his name on the wall behind me on this side, and it'll start as like a 10-point font. And every time we mention him, it's going to get bigger, and eventually it's going to cover the entire wall behind me.
You're just going to see the LAR in Clark at that point. Yeah.
I'm trying to get his picture card. What I'm trying to see is if he's changed his usage at all. There's some evidence he's changed his usage. I like this. He's going to the sweeper less and the curveball more, and he's had a real hard time against the lefties. Also, he's using the cutter less, which is not so great. But has not gone to the 4-seam. So what is he? He's just going curve sinker to lefties. I don't know what he's figured out against lefties, but he's using the curve a lot more, the slider a lot less. Let me do it just for lefties.
Couldn't figure out against lefties be not throwing a trash cutter against them? Couldn't that be the answer? Is like, hey, I got this bad pitch that I shouldn't throw in this situation. So
oh my gosh. Against lefties, cutter 65% to 40% to 35% to 20% this month. Okay.
There you go.
All right. I'm back in. I like them all. Buy them all.
All right. You got to defend Michael Lorenzen for us because I don't see it. What's good here?
It's fairly simple. He added a sweeper in the offseason, and just gives him he's got kind of the kitchen sink, but with the sweeper he has an out pitch. So like a 107 4-seam fastball, 119 slider by Stuff Plus, and then a bunch of kind of 80s to 90s. So it's a kitchen sink. It's not very impressive, but it's in a 2-start in those matchups. I kind of feel okay about him.
What do you think about this group, Al?
Yeah, I'm passing on Lorenzen. It was a little bit hard with those matchups, but yeah, no, I've got Schmidt in my 15-teamer. Somebody dropped him, and I'm happy to use him for this 2-step. Not going to pursue him in 12-teamers just yet. So let's see. Was there Gibson? Yeah, the Rays matchup scares me a little bit. Ashcraft is going to be always in my rotation with 2 starts. So the matchups definitely don't scare me. He's not the guy I think that we were hoping he would be back in spring training. He's not really emerged as a strikeout pitcher, but he keeps the ball in the park and contains damage that way. So I'm definitely always in on Ashcraft as a 2-start guy. The one pitcher that isn't included that actually we talked a little bit about offline is Garrett Braxton. And
Braxton Garrett. Yeah.
Braxton Garrett, him too. I finally did it. I had been waiting to reverse the names. And on this show, I finally did it.
It's kind of a 2 firsties, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
So
Garrett's more of a first name than Braxton.
What's he got?
Sorry. Continue.
I'm planning on starting him in a 12-teamer this week. I think the Braves start was an aberration for him. We've seen, Sandy Alcantara blow up. We've seen seemingly everybody has blown up.
The Braves are good.
Yeah, it's It's a good 2-start week at Arizona and then home against the Reds. That's solid.
Yeah. And prior to the 11-run blow up was, pretty much looking like the picture that I was expecting him to be this year, which is a guy that I could at least sometimes use with 2 starts.
Yeah, I think if you're going to watch only one of those 2 starts, maybe watch the Cincinnati one. Because if something bad's going to happen to Braxton Garrett in those matchups, it's going to be the Diamondbacks at Chase Field doing it to him, more likely than the Reds at whatever they call Marlins Park these days. I've lost track of who's sponsoring
Home
that particular
Depot,
stadium. Lone Depot?
Lone Depot, yeah.
Lone Depot Field. Nice.
So now I've botched the pitcher's name and his ballpark.
And we're giving away free advertising, so we're going to get in a lot of trouble. Anything good in Jake Irvin's profile? He debuted for the Nationals this week. He's got a 2-step. He's at San Francisco and home against the Mets. So just by combination of quality of those teams, that's sort of a not taking a chance, but it's more of a deep league sort of question.
Looks like a kind of a sinker slider guy that may have some trouble against lefties, by the model at least. But he is tied for the lead in Stuff Plus on Washington with an even 100. So,
that's they collect, right? They collect the 100s
with
and the
faint praise, if you might call it that. Given his minor league strikeout and whiff rates, I'm not super into him.
Yeah, seems like a matchup dependent guy, and that could be a pretty tough profile to use, especially as we get into that warmer season in DC. We've seen the ball really fly at Nationals Park the last several summers. Al, I think you mentioned before we started recording, Rich Hill has some pretty nice matchups coming up. So you're trying to stream him for a week or 2?
Yeah, 50 teamers, definitely. It's 1-start weeks, both this coming week and the week after. But this coming week, he's got the Rockies in Pittsburgh. That's a perfect matchup. And then at Detroit the following week. And he's actually been pretty good lately. It's all been pretty favorable matchups, although the recent 3-start streak, and you can maybe extend it back to 4 against the Astros. He gave up 2 runs in 6 innings, but didn't strike anybody out. But then he went to Colorado and gave up 1 run in 6.
Yeah, that was the weirdest.
7 strikeouts. But, and then good starts against the Reds and the
like
Nationals.
The Adam Wainwright vibe,
in their park.
He's got that. So, he's got the elite curveball, and he's gonna play everything off the elite curveball.
So I think that can work with these 2 starts. He's got the Blue Jays here on Friday, so that might not go so well, but I wouldn't let that dissuade me from taking him with those 2 matchups coming up.
Yeah, I do like him beyond the weekend, so I think that's a good call for some of those deeper leagues out there.
There's a little 2 groupings where it's like, Ashcraft and who else do we have that we all liked in the 2-start?
I think Clark Schmidt
and Ashcraft. I kind of like those better. And then I have this like more riskier group with Lorenzen. I would put Hill in the more riskier group with Lorenzen, Hill, Gibson, and Garrett. And honestly, I know I'm not supposed to say this, but I think it's like luck. Like you could throw a dart at those. Like we have models and we have our opinions and we're going to tell you what we think, but any of those, they're of the quality where like any of those guys could be pitcher of the week.
Or they could win the opposite of that award, which has not been named yet. And this year, it seems like it's worse than usual, right? And we're seeing, because of the run environment, everyone's getting hit.
Flying more. The drag is down on the ball, so it looks like the ball is back to 2020.
The 2020 ball. Good.
Yes, we're looking at the 2020 ball, and the shift means that all these guys that don't have great strikeout rates, Garrett and Gibson and Lorenzen, are a little bit riskier because just a group of ground balls could get through, and all of a sudden that's a big inning,
So I think they should change. Here's what I think they should do with the ball. I think they should treat the ball the way that car models work, where you go like 4 or 5 years, and then you have the new version of that model. So you kind of know, like the 2023 versus the 2024 and the 2025. Oh, that's the same because it's one cycle. But in 2027, we're giving you the new ball. And then you can talk about when they introduce it, they can talk about how amazing it is, all the new features they added to it. And then we can analyze it and kind of adjust to it and get used to it. Neon threads. Neon threads.
That back in the day, what's his face wanted to change the color of the ball.
Wait, who wanted to change the color of the ball?
The legendary A's owner, I think. Chuck Finley? Or is he
That's the pitcher.
Angels owner? Finley.
Charlie Finley,
I think. Was he an A's owner or an
Change the
Angels
color
owner?
of the ball.
Yeah, he wanted like a neon yellow ball, I think.
I've never actually played softball with one of those. I don't know if I'd like it better or not, but yeah, I just think we got to have a little more consistency with the ball. That's all. We've talked about that plenty over the
Or
last
just
few
lean
years.
in and just be like, this year it's got wings.
How about every game? How about they make a different ball for every game? They manufacture 162 balls, juggle them all up,
they
and
roll
whatever
like
day
a-
you get whatever random
Like
one.
a
So one
Plinko
park-
machine or something.
Yep.
like, what ball we gonna have today?
So the day that Colorado gets the crazy ball at Coors, they're going to score
Oh my
38
God,
combined
25.
runs.
Yeah.
But then the day that they get the concrete weighs twice as much as the other ball's ball, it's going to be like a combined no hitter for both clubs through 9 innings, right?
Oh my God.
You don't know which one you're going to get.
What would the betting market think of that?
Oh, I would love to see the betting market have to deal with that because there's nothing they could do about it. It would be the chaos that just destroys them. It'd be amazing. Bullpen report. Let's dig into a few bullpens. Liam Hendriks making progress toward a return. He's going to have 4 to 5 rehab appearances before he's activated. So I think that means if he is available in your leagues, this would be the time to go ahead and add him to your roster. It's not going to take long. This is just an amazing story. It's great to hear that he's doing well on a health front. Raisel Iglesias just got activated before we start recording. They didn't make him go back-to-back yet, so I don't think if you've got AJ Minter on your roster, it's probably not an immediate drop situation. It's more of a wait and see. Make sure Iglesias has all the velo back. They could share opportunities in the short term before Iglesias sort of moves back into that primary closer role. Eno mentioned Jason Adam earlier. 2 saves this week because Pete Fairbanks actually went on the IL to begin the week.
On the IL.
Adam did give a couple runs against the Pirates in the second of those 2 saves, so it wasn't
on the edge of our seats for that one.
It wasn't perfect, but he looks like he's sort of the guy right now for the Rays, so good pickup where he's available. We talked about Will Smith earlier in the week. That was on the Wednesday show. He appears to be getting the bulk of the save chances now in Texas.
I like Jonathan Hernandez.
You're going to wait it out with Jonathan Hernandez?
I am.
Are you okay? So here's the other part of this. The Yankees, we talked about them earlier in the week too. Are you more likely to hold Jonathan Hernandez, or are you more likely to try and get Michael King right now?
Okay, I would rather have Michael King than Jonathan Hernandez. Yes.
If someone outbids you for Michael King, is Ron Marinaccio a fallback bid for you in case the Yankees want to leave Michael King where he's at and just keep a 1-inning guy as the closer?
Oh, he has some spicy numbers, Marinaccio.
Mm-hmm.
Look at that.
I just worry that if Holmes loses the job, that it's not going to be one guy.
Yeah.
They could just go to a committee.
But the thing is with King, I think he's got value. Obviously, he has more value if he's getting steady saves, but he's also got ratios value if he's also giving you some 2-inning stints.
Marinaccio has some whiffs of command issues.
Yeah, he's got a career 13.6% walk rate through 58 innings, but an even 1 whip and a 2.02 ERA so far to begin his career. It's working so far. I don't know how long it works with a walk rate like that. Keeps the ball in the park. I guess that's how he's getting away with it so far.
Ian Hamilton's been pitching really well despite mediocre numbers in the model. The thing that I would mention about that is I think his slider is unique, and I need to look into it a little bit more. But he's got one of those pitches. Alexis Diaz, Yanier Cano, and Ian Hamilton all have unique pitches in terms of release point, velo, and movement that make the model stretch the ability of the model to do anything, because the model is basically comping pitches, not that brute force, but it's looking for combinations of release points and movements and velos and trying to compare them with what's happened before. And so if you have an Alexis Diaz fastball, nobody else does, so the model's like, I don't know, it could be like this, and Yanier Cano's sinker, nobody else throws that. He has the most drop on a sinker from a non-sidearm, so it's a unicorn. So Ian Hamilton is a name I'd throw out there too.
Are there any other relievers that you're trying to stash away right now? We talked a lot about some interesting stuff guys earlier in the week, but Al, do you have anybody else you think is close to an opportunity to close?
No, I mean, the guy that I'd been waiting on was Adam, so he's getting his chance now. And the thing, with Cano is, I mean, he's behind a really good closer who's struggled a little bit, but still
Baker's been
very good
too,
skill profile. So I haven't made any moves to pick him up. So not really. It's been more the emerging guys like Smith and Estevez and Adam. No closers in waiting right now.
two names real quick to throw on the heap. Jeremiah Estrada, just I think
Still.
obvious. Fulmer has really fallen off, and there's a real opportunity in that bullpen. And at some point, they're just going to be like, "Hey, we've got a rookie with stuff, and we're actually good. So let's screw it. Why worry about year 6 of a reliever? Come on."
Not sure. They also had Brad Boxberger serve up a walk-off home run on Thursday against the Nationals too.
So Lucas Sims also is another name I want to throw out there. Real plus slider, a good fastball. Alexis Diaz. I mean, it's not his fault. The park is part of it, but like Sims is always someone that I have sort of, at the tips of my fingers, just in case something happens.
All right. Well, there you have it. Hopefully some help as you get ready for the waiver wire this weekend. Covered a lot of ground over the last hour. Give us a follow on Twitter. Eno's at Enosaris. Al is at AlMelchiorBB. I'm at Derek Van Riper. If you don't have a subscription to The Athletic, $1 a month gets you in the door. TheAthletic.com/rates and barrels. Check out Al's waiver wire column that runs each and every week at the end of the week on Fridays. You get chats and articles from Eno, plus all the other great stuff we have as well. Some new articles just dropped this week, so be sure to check those out. That's going to do it for this episode of Rates and Barrels. Good luck with your bids this weekend. We're back with you on Monday.
Thanks for listening.